Hello, my name is Derek McLeod. I'm an assessor at Hertford Regional College and put together a series of short presentations on the City and Guilds 5357 Level 3 Electrotechnical Qualification and in particular some presentations to support apprentices providing evidence for their workplace portfolios. There are 6 presentations and they cover the 6 units for the electrical installation side of this qualification. Electrical maintenance, there's an additional unit for that. For these 6 presentations I will just be focusing on the installation side, which is units 102, 106, 108, 109, 113 and 115. This presentation covers unit 106, which is to organise and oversee the electrical work environment. I will be going through some of the more challenging criteria that through experience apprentices find it slightly more difficult to present their evidence. Hopefully when we come and you look at the next slide, you'll understand that what's been asked of you is quite simple, naturally occurring in the workplace. You probably do it all the time, and it's just relating what you do to how the criteria and the evidence is written. Okay, let's look at Unit 106 in a little bit more detail. Organise and oversee the electrical work environment. I've put up some, and I emphasise the point some, not all of the Unit 106 criteria from the criteria checklist. And I want to introduce you to the Electrotechnical Qualification Workplace Logbook. City and Guilds have this available on their website. It's the actual workplace logbook in a paper copy. Many further education providers use an online electronic portfolio. So instead of completing it in a paper workbook, you're completing it online. Whichever way you choose, the criteria and the minimum supplementary evidence are the same. Okay, remember that the apprentices should submit evidence once they've been adequately trained. Okay, and that's a slight difference between City and Guilds 5357 and City and Guilds 2357. 2357, the apprentice really should not be assessed until they've had that unit delivered, generally in college. That's different. The phrase now is the apprentice shouldn't be assessed until they've been adequately trained. Now, training takes place in the workplace and at college, so it's quite common for learners to be trained in the workplace, be competent in a task and able to submit evidence before they've even been taught it at college. I just want to remind people here, you won't read it here on this slide, and the reason I steer you to the workplace logbook is that on page 25 for unit 106 we've got minimum supplementary evidence required. Now that's why it's worth looking at both the unit criteria, and you might find that there are separate criteria checklist documents, but you might miss, if you don't read the workplace logbook, references to the minimum supplementary evidence that's required to demonstrate your competency. And for unit 106 they're asking for 2 from the following: a delivery note, a variation order, a written quotation, and a material / plant order documentation. So if we think about it, Unit 106, organise and oversee the electrical work environment. Well, of course, you're going to have a materials list. That's part of organising a job, any job that you're on. And a delivery note, if we think about those as the two most obvious bits of evidence that you can provide, it might just be that you take a simple picture on your smartphone and send that in to your assessor alongside your reflective account of the materials list that you make for the job. And the delivery note, once the materials are delivered on site. So two naturally occurring bits of evidence. You don't need to do it, you just need to collate it. So let's look at some ideas on how you can evidence meeting the criteria. And as I say, it's just some of the criteria. It's the ones I find apprentices find a little bit more challenging. Okay, but once you hear it, it should make sense. So let's look at unit or criteria 106.2.2. Implement suitable procedures to confirm that work is completed to both industry standards and health and safety legislation. So that might just be if you've already produced the risk assessment method statement, okay, and you're wearing a PPE, the procedure is that you read and understand the risk assessment and method statement, that you wear the appropriate PPE that arises from the risk assessment. So just by doing that, you're complying, you're implementing the correct procedures. Okay, those are both industry standards and health and safety legislation complied with. So make a strong statement to that effect. So remember, this is about you demonstrating that you're applying it. It's not about saying what you would do. It's about saying on any particular job that you're submitting, I did this. I read the risk assessment and method statement and I complied with the requirements within it and ensured that I wore the correct PPE. And you might be supplying a photograph alongside your written statement of you in the PPE. Okay, we've got a statement there. Be able to coordinate and liaise with other relevant people. And 3.1, it says select effective procedures to ensure coordination with other workers and contractors. And also steps to resolve issues which are outside the scope of their job role. If you think about it, you will come across issues that are outside of your job. Other contractors, other trades. Excuse me, Sparky, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you give me a hand? I've had and I'll think of an example. I've had a delivery of materials I could do with a second pair of hands. Okay, well it's not in your job role, is it? Your employer isn't paying you to help the plasterer shift a load of plasterboard upstairs, but quite often we might do that. What would be the appropriate thing to do? Yeah, hold on, I'll just clear that with my boss. Yeah, a simple statement about an example like that. Well, that would be resolving an issue that's outside of your job role. And how we selected the appropriate procedure there is just by seeking authorization to do something. So, again, a strong statement to that effect. I was asked by to do, on whatever it is the example is, As that's outside of my job role, I ask permission from. To me, that's a strong statement that gives it a good, that would evidence that. And you can think, the idea here is that you can probably think of other examples that naturally occur in a workplace, and that would evidence 3.1. What about 3.2? Evaluate and apply communication techniques that are clear, accurate, and appropriate to the situation. Well, if we think of that example above, what's appropriate to the situation? Okay, well, you're not going to, in that example, the appropriate communication is verbal. You know, that you spoke with. It might be that you are given notice of something that might be happening tomorrow. Excuse me, electrician, but tomorrow, instead of working in that area, can you work in another area? I will need to get in here tomorrow morning. Is that okay? Well, again, the job might dictate that you were meant to be in that specific area or zone carrying out a particular task. But what you could do is you could phone your boss, text your boss and say, is it okay if I work in a different room tomorrow because the plumbers want to be in there, because another trade wants to be in there? Again, just an example, and you can think of probably examples where that has occurred. So say that, and that's the sort of evidence you should be submitting for 3.2. 3.3, what does that say? Demonstrate working effectively with colleagues to enhance performance. So what's the phrase? Many hands make light work. You know, a task is much quicker with two pairs of hands than one. Okay, sometimes quicker than double the speed. It literally is as simple as that. Making a statement, for example, I work with my colleague, okay, to route cables in. One of us drilled out the joist, and the other one from the cable pulley routed the cables through. A nice simple example of working effectively to enhance performance. You can think of many more. That's the sort of thing we should be stating for 3.3. 4.1. Now something which I find apprentices talk to me about: organising operatives by allocating duties and responsibilities to make best use of their competence and skill. Okay, and then 4.2, monitor the work of the operatives to ensure it is in accordance with industry working practices, programme of work, health and safety. 4.2d, cost effectiveness and environmental considerations. So it's quite a little bit there, but what I find is apprentices say to me is that I'm an apprentice. I don't organise other people. I'm, subordinate to everyone on site, so I don't do the organising. I am organised. I guess if you think about it as really clear communication, it's really 3.3, demonstrating working effectively with colleagues. So that will help you evidence 4.1 and 4.2 onwards, because it is about communicating with your work colleagues to get whatever the task is that needs to be done as quick as we can. So let's think about 4.1. Organising people to make the best use of their competence and skill. It might be that you're a little bit more quicker and agile, okay? Working aloft, so if we're fitting downlighters, you're much quicker, okay, terminating and making off downlighters, okay, a little bit more agile than, say, another colleague. So you might just say, look, I'll do the lighting on the set of steps or the safe working platform. You do the power. I'll work up, you work down. We'll get it done a lot quicker if we split up. I'm a lot quicker up on the steps than you are. That's just one example. You could probably think of more. Just say it. We organised, or I organised, the tasks by making best use of my skill set at doing X and my colleagues' skill at doing Y. And then when you come on to actually doing it, monitor the work to ensure that. So a statement to something to the effect of, I ensured that the work that was done by both me and my colleague complied with the industry practices and the programme of work. Okay, by simply referring to the job, frequently referring to the job specification, BSM 671 on-site guide, well, that will ensure that you meet industry standards, won't it? Programme of work, I constantly check to see that I was on schedule with the programme of work given to me by my supervisor. That's what we'd actually do. Okay, if we think about it, you'll quite often go in and, you know, the task will be, let's get the power done by lunchtime, get the lighting done by, you know, afternoon, and you'll shout out regularly, wouldn't you? How are we getting on, you know, with the power? You almost done. You check with your colleague, they check with you. It's just a statement to that effect. Health and safety requirements, again, it's that buddy checking, isn't it? That I check throughout the course of the job that I maintain my PPE, and that my colleague, you know, if I noticed my colleague, you know, removed an item of PPE, I ensured that he placed it back on. Again, simple examples, and that helps you evidence health and safety requirements. Cost effectiveness, well, a statement to the effect that you ensured that both yourself and your colleagues weren't wasteful with the materials. That would suffice. And what about the environmental considerations? Okay, environmental considerations, a statement to the effect of, and if you think about a job or a task that you're trying to evidence, it would be you making a statement to say that you are monitoring throughout the course of the cable support mechanism, and let's look at an example fitting metal containment. So if the specification was IP4X, that you would ensure that your workmanship and the work of your colleagues maintain that level of IP protection as you fitted and installed that product. So a statement to that effect. And if you can think of other environmental considerations in whichever location you're working in, it's just ensuring that the workmanship is up to standard. So make a statement, a nice strong statement to that effect. Now we look at, again, 4.3. Evaluate and apply appropriate procedures to correct issues that arise during work activities. So it might be very similar. That might be the same statement you've already made for 3.2. And it's quite often the case that the statements that you make can map across more than one criteria, and this is a good example. So evaluate and apply appropriate procedures to corrective issues that arise, then they do, don't they? They will arise during the course of the activity. I think I gave an issue in 3.2 about a trader asking you to assist them with, a delivery. Well, yes, I can, but I'll need to ask my boss, and you can just ask, verbally, question your boss. You could ring up your boss. You could text your boss for free. And you can think of other examples. If a customer comes in and says, whilst you're doing that, could I have, and let's just say you were first fixed in and cable into one socket, customer asks for an additional socket to be put in addition to that one right next to it. Would you do it? Okay. No, not without seeking authorization. So again, it's about realizing that, that there is a process, and that you apply that procedure to correct an issue that arises. So it might just be, let me first get authorization from my boss before I do that. So there will be things that happen on any job that arise throughout the course of of any work activity that you will have to correct, and it's about making a statement to that effect on a reflective account or any other means, a video, an audio recording that you provide, saying something that hits that criteria. Now let's look at 5.1. Now we're talking about organising a program for working on an electrical system. Again, it's something that you may not actually have to do. So there might be a product of work. There might be within the method statement the program of work, in which case you've already evidenced that. Great. You'll find on bigger jobs they will have a flow chart, they'll have a Gantt chart, and you're able to produce that alongside your testimony. But that's a very formal bit of evidence, isn't it? A supplementary bit of evidence. So think about the quick wins. What might have been produced? And if we think about the minimum supplementary evidence requirement, what about a written quotation? Quite often, the written quotation provided on a job to the customer will include the duration of works alongside the install and the specification. So simply just send that in alongside. Take a picture shown quite clearly, written quotation. That will help to suffice an evidence 5.1 and 5.1a. So we've got a couple of examples there on a larger project where it says produce. Well, you can send in like a Gantt chart for the project timeline. You can send in the quotation. More informally, if we think about it, on a smaller works, you've got that process where the customer will, and if you think about how we're pricing work and how your boss will price work, okay, what's the activity and what's the time it's going to take? Those are the two things, specification and time, that will affect the quotation that your boss will provide to a customer. So even if it's a smaller job and that isn't a formal document, there's probably a formal record of that, and it could simply be in a small job, like to come in and provide an additional socket, please. How much would that be? How long would that take? Those are the questions the customer will be naturally asking. So that's the same as 5.1 and 5.1a. Now, quite often, even if your boss says it's going to be X amount of pounds and it's going to take me this long to do it, they'll probably still confirm that in a text. So it might be something a little bit less formal, like a screenshot of a text that you can provide to evidence that. And if we think now 5.1b, liaison with other trades, produce a simple program of work, including requirements for the following. 5.1a is estimate the amount of time required, and 5.1b is liaison with other trades. If we think about jobs that you might be on, that tasks can be carried out simultaneously, others require other things to be done beforehand. And if we think about the work environment, that's going to be happening, isn't it? Because let's think about first fixing in a domestic scenario. First fixing and routing cables. Well, we need to liaise with other trades because we need to consider the time. For an example is the carpenters will have to drop in the stud work for us to route our cables down and to provide switches and sockets into walls. We can't do that until the first fix of those stud wells has been provided. Then we come along and first fix and route our cables in. So there is a requirement for us to liaise with other trades, isn't there? Sharing that information and considering it in our program of works, and you need to evidence that here in 106. 5.2, communicate with others clearly and concisely, and you can make a statement to the effect of communicating with other trades, with other customers, even with your colleagues. Clearly and concisely, yes, obviously it's important that we're understood on site and during a work activity. If we're not, that leads to confusion. And if we look at 5.2 and 5.3 and 5.1b, we can almost clump them together, and you'll probably make a statement to the effect with, I liaised with, and I go back to that example about I liaised with the carpenter, okay, to look at when they were going to be dropping in the stud work for that partition wall. I asked him a question when I was on site. And really just making a statement about that evidence is 5.1b, 5.2, 5.3, because quite clearly that you have assessed, you have realised it's necessary to liaise with the carpenter to find out when they're dropping in a new wall before you can route in the cables for the power or switch. Then there are other examples, and there are other trades. We can think of the carpenters, we can think of speaking to plumbers, we can think of times when we will speak to the plasterers to ensure, you're going to need to liaise with the plasterers, because what we don't do is, if we've spoken with the carpenter, when are you dropping a stud work in? Okay, great. You're doing it on Monday. We'll arrange to come back on a Tuesday and route our cables in. That's no good if you haven't ensured that you haven't liaised with the plasterer, because if you come back and find that the plasterer's plastered over or boarded up both sides of that wall, life's suddenly become a little bit more difficult. So I'm giving you an example you can think of other similar examples, that's going to allow you to evidence there. So now we come on about to look at organising the resource requirements. Whatever the job, definitely, we're going to need to organise resources. Even you're a resource. We've got to organise ourselves, yourself, to get there. But for you, there's some quick wins here. Organise the provision of resources. We've got naturally occurring documents, materials list, delivery note. Okay, this great time where you can meet the 2 minimum evidence requirements for this unit. So if we look at and read the criteria, organise resources. Confirm that the materials are the right type, fit for purpose, in the correct quantity, suitable for the work to be completed cost efficiently. You probably do this. If you don't, you will. It is part of the role of an electrician. So from the specification, we're going to get together a materials list. Provide that. Take a picture. If it's an electronic PDF, an email that you might send through to the wholesalers, attach that. Okay. When it gets delivered, there's a delivery note. Attach that to the write-up. What are you going to do? You ensure that the materials that you ordered from the materials list match up to, if I've asked for 10, I want 10. If I find out there's only 8, okay, that's part of that list there, isn't it? You've made sure that there's the correct quantity that's been ordered and delivered. You are definitely going to make sure it's the right type, because you've considered that from a specification, aren't you? Fit for purpose, okay. Suitable for the work to be completed cost efficiently. Again, ensuring that you source out the materials from your approved wholesaler. That would be just acceptable for you to state that I ordered the materials from the wholesaler approved by my employer or by my supervisor, rather than you going off to organising it from a wholesaler, for example, that your employer doesn't have an account with, doesn't receive his normal discount. Just by you doing what you actually do helps you evidence 62D. And of course, you're going to check them off, aren't you? Like I say, you're going to make sure that you've got the correct quantity. You're going to check and open the packaging, because if you've just signed for that delivery, and then when you open up the packaging and find out that those expensive light fittings are all cracked and damaged, well, you've signed to say that you've received them in perfect order. If subsequently you're ringing up the wholesaler and he's got your signature on a delivery note, he's going to say, well, you signed for them. You signed them, they were all okay. Oh, you didn't check them. So all you're doing here is actually making a statement about what's actually happening on site, isn't it? So just say those words in your written reflective account that I put together the materials list from the specification. When they were delivered, I ensured that they were the right type, fit for purpose, the correct quantity. Okay, I used the approved wholesaler to source materials out for, and I opened up the packaging and ensured that all the materials were not damaged. You've just done 6.1 to 6.3. 6.4. Demonstrate effective measures for the safe handling and storage of materials, tools and equipment in the work location. So what do we expect to see and read here? Yeah, I do want to, it's easy if you've got a secure lockup. You can show an image of that, or a strong statement to say materials were kept in a secure lockup with only the electricians having the access code or the key. On a smaller job, it might just be you've got an allocated room for the electrical materials. Plumbers in one room, electricians in another room. It might be you've got a corner in one room. Okay. The main thing is it's effective measures, so that you keep your materials in one location and that you demonstrate that there is restricted access. So if we think about, rather than a large commercial job with a lockup, if you think about a smaller job, a domestic job for example, you want to ensure that the premises are locked when you leave at the end of the day. So a strong statement to that effect would be okay, and an image showing materials were kept tidy in one spot. What's not okay is an image of materials just strewn across the workplace. That clearly isn't effective measures, is it? Not only that, if it's just randomly strewn across the work area, you've introduced hazards and trip hazards into the work location. So I hope you've found this helpful. You can understand the sort of language you use to evidence the criteria here, the sort of naturally occurring pieces of evidence that are quick wins for you. Materials list, delivery notes, quotations, they're often done by your employer and you just need to add them in to your submission. They're quick wins. So good luck. If you can, if you have any comments to make, please post them. Any requests? I haven't covered everything in 106, like I said at the beginning. I hope you found this useful, and appreciate your comments, and look out for my other 5 presentations on the other units.